All right, y'all. We back on the Man Mr. Nightmare. We got three terrifying true night out stories. So we ain't gonna waste no time. We're gonna get right into it. So let's go. Story one.
Last year, when all my friends were home from college for the summer, we decided to go out and party as much as we could, especially since some of them were moving away for good after that summer. All of us were old enough to go out and drink legally by then, so most nights we just hit up the local bars until they closed. One specific weekend, while the big group of us was out, my parents just happened to be out of town. Instead of staying out until 2 or 3 in the morning, I suggested that we go back to my parents' place to continue the party. Everyone loved the idea. I told everyone that they could drink as much as they wanted as long as they crashed at my place, which everyone agreed to. We went back to the house around 11:30 that night. I suspected a decent amount of people, but was surprised at just how many people showed up. My parents had a huge house, and the closest neighbors were at the end of the street, so usually we could be as loud as we wanted without being disruptive. They also had a pool, which usually got my friends excited. I started looking around at all the people, and I noticed that there were several of them I didn't recognize. When I asked one of my friends who all these people were, they just gave me the generic friend of a friend response. At first, it didn't seem so weird. Most of the strangers that I didn't recognize were surrounded by people that I did recognize. They were joking around and being an active part of conversations. At 2 in the morning, a bunch of the people at the house decided to jump into the pool. There must have been 15 people in the pool. I didn't jump in because I was sitting on the deck with my girlfriend just talking. While I was listening to her talk, I noticed that there was a strange guy standing in the living room of the house looking out the window at the pool. He had a red cup in his hand, just like a lot of other people did. Something about this guy was off, though. He looked older than us. Not like old man old, but definitely older than his early 20s. My girlfriend could tell I was distracted and asked me what was wrong. I asked her if she knew who that guy was, and she told me she didn't. She said our friend Shane may know who it is. I stood up on the deck trying to locate Shane. While I was standing there scanning everyone in the pool, my girlfriend said the same thing I did. She thought the guy seemed a little off also. I didn't have to look very far for Shane because he ended up walking onto the deck right at that moment. I asked him about the weird guy in the living room, and he didn't know who it was either. He said he was pretty sure that he came in with Dustin's cousin. Of course, Dustin's cousin was also someone I didn't know very well. I was going to ask Dustin about this guy, but Shane informed me that Dustin, as well as his cousin, had left already since neither one of them had been drinking. I figured that was just my luck. I ended up confronting the strange man and asked him what his name was. He just stared at me with a blank expression. It was like I asked him an impossible question. Then he started to make this weird humming sound. I thought the guy was about to overheat from the question. I took the red cup from his hand and told him to sit on the couch. I honestly thought that this guy just had entirely too much to drink. I figured I would let him sleep here since there was no way I was letting this guy into a car. I had to basically force the guy to sit on the couch, and when he did, he just continued staring in front of him. It was probably the weirdest interaction I've ever had in my entire life. Once he was on the couch, I went back to Shane and my girlfriend, and I told them that I was going to hurt Dustin tomorrow for leaving the strange dude at my house. I tried calling and texting Dustin, but he didn't answer. For the next couple of hours, people continued to party a little bit, but eventually they all started to fade. During that time, I would look over to the couch and the strange man was still just sitting there, staring at nothing. I started to suspect that this guy might have been partying with something else. At 4 in the morning, almost everyone was asleep. My girlfriend went to bed about 30 minutes prior. When I went into the living room, there were about 7 people asleep on the couches and floor, but the strange guy was gone. I asked one of my friends in the living room who was still awake if he saw the strange guy, and he said that he saw him leave about 20 minutes ago. I was upset that he left in the condition he was in, but deep down, I was just happy he wasn't in my house anymore. I got into my bed next to my girlfriend, and I fell asleep almost instantly. I have that strange sensation when you're sleeping and you feel like someone is watching you. I'm not sure of the exact time, but it was still dark in my room when the sensation woke me up. I basically sat up in bed quickly, and when I did, I saw someone leaving my room. I thought it was my girlfriend going to the bathroom, until I went to lie back down and saw that my girlfriend was next to me, still asleep. I jumped out of bed. I was terrified and honestly a little confused. The only thing that came to mind was that one of my friends had to be drunk and probably accidentally wandered into my bedroom. I went downstairs and I could hear a weird noise. It sounded like someone was digging for something in a drawer or cabinet. I passed through the living room where I saw a bunch of my friends still asleep. Next to the living room is the kitchen where I expected to see one of my messed up friends, but nobody was in there. Down the hall that's off of the kitchen, I saw light coming from the room on the right. That's my dad's office. I snuck down the hall and hid behind a giant plant that's outside my office. In that room was the strange guy from before, and he was rummaging through all my dad's desk drawers. Part of me wanted to confront this guy and act like a hero, but for some reason I was terrified. I could see his face from where I was hiding, and he still had that expressionless look on his face as he was going through all the desk drawers. I didn't want him to see me, so before he left the office, I snuck back down the hall and into the kitchen. Before I could make it to the stairs, I heard him coming down the hall. I didn't want this guy to know I was awake, so I basically grabbed a blanket from one of my sleeping friends and I dove onto the ground in the living room and pretended like I was asleep. I heard the guy walk into the living room, and he just stood there. I could hear him breathing. He probably stood there for 5 minutes, which felt like an eternity. Every once in a while, when he was standing there, he would make that weird noise he was making before. After those 5 minutes, he went back into the kitchen. Just like in the office, I could hear him going through one of the drawers. He wasn't in the kitchen very long. Before I knew it, he was back in the living room, and it sounded like he was stomping over in my direction. I felt useless. It felt like he was charging at me. I didn't know what to do. He was practically standing over me, and then he grabbed the sliding door, which I didn't even realize I was lying right next to. He walked outside and closed the door. I waited a good 15 minutes before I got up and locked the door. I ran back to the front door, and I made sure I locked that as well. As soon as the doors were locked, I went to the office to see if this guy had stolen anything. I spent a while going through everything, and I couldn't tell if anything was stolen. To me, it looked like everything was still there. When I went into the kitchen, it didn't look like anything was out of place, until I noticed one of the knives from my dad's knife set was missing. I looked everywhere for the knife, and I couldn't find it anywhere. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I was on edge that this weird guy was going to come back. The next morning, I asked every one of my friends if they knew who that guy was, and nobody did. When I finally talked to Dustin and asked him about the guy, he had no idea who he was either. I asked if his cousin knew him, and Dustin told me that the guy was being weird and he was freaking them out. He kept following Dustin's cousin around, but not saying anything. He was just acting like a super creep, which is why they ended up suddenly leaving and not saying goodbye. Thankfully, I never saw the guy again. I truly have no idea who he was. He just showed up at the house and started acting like a creep. He had to be the one who took the knife, and I don't even want to begin to think why. The more I've reflected on that night, I was able to confirm that it was definitely the creepy guy I saw leaving my bedroom when I woke up. I have no idea what he wanted, and I think that's what freaks me out so much about this story.
Story 2.
Several years back, one of my best friends, Riley, worked here in town as something called a location manager, or location producer. What that means is that he would scout local areas for directors who would be shooting movies here. At the time, our small town was trying to entice filmmakers to come here and shoot movies for cheap. During that time, some no-name director wanted to come here and shoot a horror movie since the area looked like every location from every Stephen King novel. When the director came to visit the town, Riley took him all around and showed him this one house, which, according to local lore, is supposed to be cursed or haunted. Of course, nobody from the Century actually believed that, but it was fun that our town had its own little Amityville horror campfire tale. When the director found out, he became obsessed with this house and practically insisted on filming some of his scenes in there. Riley wasn't as much of a skeptic as most of us are, so he was a little uneasy about trying to get access to the house. But ultimately, he didn't want to let the director down. So the next day, Riley tracked down whoever owned the property and asked if they could use the house for several scenes they wanted to film. Riley said the owner was some creepy old guy who smelled like death. According to Riley, this guy gave him a really bad feeling. Riley was sure that the guy was going to put up a fight about using the house, but he said he agreed to let them use it with almost no fight back. The director was pumped, and they continued to work on the pre-production of the film. That night, a few of the locals who were working on the pre-production aspects of the film decided to take Riley out to celebrate. Apparently, this was the last location they needed to lock down before setting up a schedule to record. He didn't want to go alone, so he dragged me with him. Those film crew people sure knew how to party. We started hopping from bar to bar, and we were feeling good. There was a woman there with us partying. I don't know if she was a producer or what her role on the film was. All I know is that she was working on the film in some capacity. Anyway, I was starting to vibe with her throughout the night. Her name was Jade. A little after 1 in the morning, Jade suggested to the group of us, which at this point was 6 people, that we go to the allegedly haunted house and check it out. Riley immediately shot it down. Since I didn't have anything to lose, and I was trying to impress this girl, I basically teamed up with her and tried to get the group on board with the idea. When everyone else got on board, Riley finally caved in and agreed to join us. Jade said that we would have the perfect excuse if we got caught. We could just say that we were doing some pre-production work at night, and knowing that the house is abandoned, we figured it would be less disruptive to the neighborhood doing it then. It sounded great to me, but that's not how this type of situation works. We would still need approval from the owner to enter the property, and Riley was worried that if we got caught, we would lose permission to use the house. It was a tense drive to the house. I could tell Riley was upset, and I felt like a jerk that I didn't back him up. When we got there, I came to my senses for a brief moment and tried to get the group to reconsider going into the house. Jade started to call me a coward in a flirtatious way, and my efforts to get them to reconsider evaporated right away. One of the guys tried to open the door, and surprisingly, it was unlocked. The 6 of us walked in quietly. It was extremely cold in there. It wasn't exactly warm outside, but it was noticeably colder inside the house for some reason. Everyone we were with looked fascinated, like they were looking at buried treasure, except for Riley, who looked like he was going to be sick. He kept complaining about the smell, but none of us smelled anything. We didn't walk very far. The front door led to mostly empty living room. We were all still standing in that room, just using our phones as a flashlight, when we heard movement coming from upstairs. I'm well aware that houses like this make all sorts of crazy noises since everything is wooden and old. But this noise we heard upstairs was unmistakably footsteps. It was clearly the pattering of steps going from one side of the room to the other. We all stood completely still. Jade insisted that we check it out. Riley put his foot down and he said he was leaving. The other guys in the group also didn't want any part of the confrontation, so they all went outside with Riley. Unfortunately, I couldn't let Jade go upstairs alone. Even though I wanted nothing to do with whoever may be running around up there, we quietly snuck up the stairs, which were in the back of the house. Right next to the stairs was a door. I tried to open it just to see what was behind it, and it was locked. I found it incredibly weird that this door was locked, but the front door was open. When Jane started to go upstairs, I followed closely behind her. I noticed when we were on the stairs that the footsteps had stopped. We were tiptoeing as quietly as we could. When we got upstairs, it was eerily quiet up there. No sounds at all. We took a few steps forward down the hall, and I expected that at any moment someone was going to run at me, but nothing ever happened. I was starting to think that this woman, Jade, whom I just met, had some kind of death wish because she decided to shout into the darkness if anybody was there. I almost fainted when she did this, but no response. We looked in all the rooms upstairs, and there wasn't anybody in any of the rooms. I won't lie, I was freaked out. We clearly heard movement upstairs, but there was clearly nobody up there. We started going downstairs, and Jade made a joke about how she was sad that we didn't get to see a ghost. When we got to the first floor, The door that was next to the staircase that had just been locked a few minutes ago was now randomly opened. I don't just mean unlocked. I mean the door was legitimately wide open. I looked at the open door and noticed that it led to a pitch black basement. Jade looked terrified for the first time since we entered the house. Instead of being scared, I was starting to think that this was a practical joke. It just seemed so unbelievable. I attempted to go into the basement, and Jade grabbed my hand and begged me not to. I admit I was being ignorant here. I was blatantly ignoring her because I was sure I was being messed with. I went downstairs, and it was even colder down there than the rest of the house, which made sense to me since this was the basement after all. It was so dark down there, and it smelled horrible. I figured the smell was some kind of backed up sewage. I was trying to use my cell phone flashlight, but it was barely doing anything. As I was whipping my phone around the room, I thought I saw something move near some boxes on the floor. It made me jump just out of sheer shock, but I instantly decided in my head that it was just the shadows from my flashlight that freaked me out. I started walking over to the boxes to investigate it myself. While I was walking over, I started to think about the possibility of someone being over there, maybe a homeless person, and I didn't want any trouble. I know homeless people can be harmless, but where I live, they're usually dangerous, and I was not equipped in any way to defend myself. When I was a few feet away from the boxes, I clearly saw a shadow get up from behind the boxes and run over to the other side of the room. It was so fast and so dark that I couldn't see anything or make out any details besides just the shadow from my phone light. I felt the wind hit me in the face when he rushed by me. I had no idea what this was, and I didn't want to find out. I ran over to the stairs and I announced to whatever was down there that I was leaving and that I was sorry for intruding. Just before turning and running up the stairs, I heard a whisper from the basement say to me, "Don't leave just yet." I paused for a second and then freaked out and ran out of the basement. Jade was still standing there at the top of the stairs. She heard the whisper as well and was hysterical. We ran out of the house and Riley was still outside with the other guys. We got into the car and started driving away. I told them what happened, and they looked terrified. I still wasn't sure if somehow these guys were messing with me. However, the way they were all acting made me feel like they weren't messing with me. Joke or not, this night messed up Riley. He didn't want anything to do with that house. The next day, he called the director and told them that he couldn't film there for safety reasons. He made up some excuse about the house just not being safe to film, and the cast and crew could get hurt working inside there. The director was upset, but gave up fighting after a while. When Riley told the owner of the property that they weren't shooting there anymore, the man just laughed and thanked Riley for his consideration. A few months later, the project fell through, and they didn't even shoot that specific movie here. Apparently, the director wanted a ridiculous amount of money to fund the movie, and it just wasn't possible. Whenever I relive that night, I still can't believe what I witnessed. It doesn't make any sense to me. Part of me still feels like it had to be a prank, but what would be the point of continuing the joke all these years later? I saw the fear in all of their eyes, and that wasn't fake. I don't know that I fully believe the house is haunted, but something is for sure not right in that house, and I'll be happy never going back and finding out for sure.
Story 3.
Some people in this world are just messed up. I never realized just how crazy some people can be until one night I had a horrifying encounter I will never forget. One of my best friends was getting married, and his best man literally paid for all of us groomsmen to travel to Cape Cod. Usually, I would be annoyed to have to spend a lot of money to travel for a bachelor party, but I wasn't going to complain about basically a free trip with my boys. The entire trip was going to be 3 overnights, which is excessive for a bachelor party in my opinion, but it was still cool. We spent the days on the beach, and at night, we would go out and drink at some of the bars. We especially liked this one bar that was right on the water. The first night out, I met a girl named Brittany. She was a local girl, and we hit it off right away. The next day, we were texting the whole time. That night, we all went out again. My friends wanted to find a different bar, but I decided to stay at the one from the night before so I could hang out with Brittany. In my defense, he insisted that I hang out with her, so that's exactly what I did. We spent a couple of hours at the bar having some drinks and just talking and getting to know each other. Once we were feeling really good from the beverages we'd consumed, she asked if I wanted to go for a walk on the beach. I thought this would be a great way for the two of us to get some alone time, so without hesitation, I was ready for our beach walk. We walked for a while. For the first big chunk of the walk, we were walking on what I assumed was a private beach because there were houses that backed up against the beach. She told me that we were okay walking here, and who knows, maybe we were. We eventually walked far enough that there were no more houses. We were traversing rocks. It was dark enough that it was kind of hard to see where we were going. I didn't care about any of that. What I cared about was that it finally seemed like we were completely alone. I was mentally preparing to make a move when I noticed Brittany making a weird face as she looked off into the distance a little bit. I asked what she was looking at, and she pointed at a rock cluster that was about 20 feet away from where we were standing. With a confused voice, she asked if I could see that guy standing over there. I was squinting and trying to focus my eyes in the dark, and I didn't see anything. I asked her where she saw this guy. She doubled down and pointed even harder. She kept saying that it's right there, and she was almost annoyed that I couldn't see what she was talking about. I finally saw what I thought she was talking about. I told her it was just a rock, hoping that I could get her attention back. However, she couldn't let it go. She was adamant that it was a person. It was just way too dark out there to tell for sure. She said that she was going to move in closer to get a better look and to prove to me that it was a person. As I was telling her that it was clearly a rock, I saw the figure move. I stopped her from moving forward and admitted that I thought she may be right. We were only about 10 feet away now, and I could clearly see that it was a person. He almost looked like he was partially kneeling on the rock. As my eyes were getting more used to the darkness, I was able to clearly see that he was wearing a worn-out maroon-colored hat. I felt like an idiot that I couldn't tell whether it was a person before getting this close. I quietly leaned over to Brittany and told her that we should probably leave, just in case. She agreed. We quietly retreated off the rocks and started heading back the way we came. I didn't realize it right away, but after a few minutes of walking, I noticed that the man we saw was following us. He was a good distance behind us, but it was him for sure. We could see the same maroon hat. Brittany looked a little nervous, and I tried to tell her that it was nothing to worry about. He's probably just walking in the same direction as us. She didn't agree. She told me that random guys like this don't just walk on this specific part of the beach at this hour of night. I thought she was overreacting, until I looked back again, and now the guy was moving toward us with a little more zip in his step. Brittany started to freak out, and I was scared myself now. I suggested that we run, and she agreed. We were moving fast, and when I turned around, the man in the maroon hat was now also sprinting like we were. There was no denying it this time. This guy was running after us. We eventually got to the part of the beach where the houses were. I told Brittany to trust me, and I grabbed her hand, and we ran to the backyard of one of the houses. We jumped the fence, and instead of running down the road, we got on the ground and hid under the Jeep that was in the driveway. Brittany was holding her hand over her mouth, and I was just trying to keep my composure. I was freaking out on the inside. I was hoping that the man wouldn't chase us off the beach. Unfortunately, that hope didn't get me anywhere. While we were under the Jeep, I saw the man walk down the driveway. I could see his feet. They were bloody and dirty. They were a foot or two away from my head. The scariest part was that the man wasn't running anymore. It was like he knew we were hiding. We just stayed completely still, so hopefully the man wouldn't have any idea where we were. Maybe the strangest part of this encounter wasn't the man or the disgusting feet, but it was the noise the man was making. He was making a clicking sound with his tongue. While he was walking by, I noticed that he was carrying something shiny in his hand. I know this is going to sound crazy, but I swear that this guy had a machete. He was holding it, and it was swinging on the side of his leg. If not that, then it was a very large knife. It took a while, but he finally passed the Jeep. I could see him slowly walking down the street. When he was several houses down, I gestured to Brittany to shimmy out from under the Jeep and quietly head back to the beach. We did just that, and once we were back on the beach, we sprinted all the way back to where we started. Every minute I looked back, expecting to see the maroon hat running after us, but he never came back. When we got back to the bar, we We were both still on edge from the strange man on the beach. We called an Uber and went back to the Airbnb where my friends were hanging out. The guys were creeped out, and I didn't blame them. Brittany and I were basically still shaking. That was the first time I had ever had a strange encounter, and I hope it's the last. I'm lucky to have left this physically unharmed. Wherever that man is today, I hope he's not still terrorizing people on the beach.
Alright, y'all, that is the end of this video. Hope y'all enjoyed it. If y'all are new to the channel, subscribe right now. And with all that being said, I'll see y'all in the next one.